Welcome to In Sequence, a comics podcast for everyone, unless you're homophobic. If you're homophobic, why are you here in the first place? But especially, why are you here today? And we'll get into that a little later. But for now, I am Scout, and these are my fellow panelists, Matt.
Hello.
Jill.
Hi.
And Robin.
Hello.
Hi, my friends. How are you on this fine, fine day?
Sweaty.
Good. I really enjoyed hearing that joke a second time.
I know. The second time around is just as good.
You're giving away the secret. Yes, we did have to start again on account of technical difficulties, because talk about homophobic. The sky is homophobic over where Matt is right now.
The Storm didn't get the news that it's Pride Month, so.
Exactly.
Storm didn't get the news that it's Pride Month.
You better get a good rainbow out of us.
Come on, come on. But before we get into our main topic, I would love to hear a little bit about what everybody has been reading recently. Jill, let's start with you. What have you been up to?
I have been deep in my Witch Hat Atelier reread because I finally...
Hell yeah.
I finally got some more of the physical volumes, or like one of the more recent physical volumes, and I decided to hop back into my reread, and I don't want to go too in-depth because I feel like that's something that I could talk about for hours, but... man, y'all, it's a real good manga. Really incredible paneling work with environment and stuff. And I am just so deep in the paint with it right now.
Yeah.
This is not my book that I'm bringing, but I picked up volume 3 recently and read through it last night. It's God. A real good book.
You're getting close to some juicy stuff.
Yeah, things are starting to pop off, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Every time I look at any page of Witch Hat Atelier, I just go, I want to make things that look like this. It's so pretty.
It's so pretty.
The line work is unbelievable. Robin, what about you? You have anything for us today?
Yeah, I have been getting back into, I have a habit of, I will read a webcomic for a while and then fall off of it. And then when I want to start reading again, I just start from the beginning because I forget what's happening.
I do this too.
Yeah. So there's just no way for me to like jump back in. So recently I have been getting back into / restarting Blade Maidens, which is a comic by Zoe Tunnell and Valentine Smith. It's about 2 queer monster hunters. Also very pretty, but in a very different way. It's very designy. There's lots of like bold monochrome pages and stuff. Ooh. Yeah, it's a very fun comic. And it's very gay, which we love.
We love that here.
Zoe Tunnell is great.
Yes,
she's
Zoe rules.
Also from Oklahoma.
Oh, hell yeah, Oklahoma represent.
Yeah, I've not read actually any of her other stuff. I know she's done, like, she did the Godzilla Valentine's Day special. She's done some really fun stuff that I really want to read. But Blade Maidens is the one that I'm reading right now.
That's really cool.
We had a nice little interaction on Blue Sky the other day about Oklahoma restaurants that we don't have access to.
Nice.
I love that.
Is it me?
Yeah, what about you, Matt? Yeah, go ahead.
I picked up this book yesterday. It's called Young Men in Love, New Romance.
Ooh.
This is the second one of these. It's an anthology. Like each story is like maybe 4 pages. But they each have like their own creative team. But it's just like a bunch of different stories with a bunch of different creative teams about young men in love.
Hell yeah.
The one that I liked the most, mostly because one of my favorite artists is in it. I'm looking for the name of it. But Giopota, I don't know how you actually pronounce that, but he goes by Gio online. But he's done a lot of really great art. He did the art for Sainted Love over at Vault a couple years ago, which I will just forewarn you, has a lot of sex in it. Like a lot of really graphic sex in it. So if that's not your thing, it may not be for you. But here, I found it. It's called Party of 3. And honestly, like, I loved that it was a story about 3 men in love instead of 2.
Nice.
That was cool.
They look cute too. I like those designs.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff that like I find missing in other comics and especially manga. Just like hot, thick guys doing hot, thick guy stuff.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the twink economy in manga is really overflowing.
Yeah. So yeah, pick up Young Men in Love, New Romance.
Hell yeah.
What have you been reading, Scout?
Yeah, Scout.
Yell with it, Scout.
Okay, you're twisting my arm. I am going to bring up the same thing that I brought up in our last episode. It's been a little while since we recorded our last episode. There's been a few more chapters of Hirano to Kagiura by Sho Harusono. And I have to bring up chapter 30 because I read it yesterday and the first page gave me such a rush of like adrenaline and emotion that I had to immediately stop reading, stand up, and I like walked over to the wall and I started doing wall push-ups because I just didn't know what else to do with myself.
That's amazing.
There's no other manga that makes me react like this. Like, this is the only one that does this to me. So it's really the most ringing recommendation I can give is that I will look at like any individual page of that manga and I'll just be like, you gotta be fucking kidding me!
Oh man, I sent you all a picture the other day because I was like, I think this is the manga that was like the original that Scout's like favorite manga spun off of, and I was like, I'm not sure. Is this that manga you're like crazy about? And you were like, yes. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was. I didn't send it, but I did take a selfie of me like clenching my fist in front of my face. Like, yes, this is the one. That's it. Those are my boys. Sasuke Tomino is good.
I'll have to read it.
It's really good.
My TBR is so long right now. So
yeah. The thing that I think you will specifically enjoy about it, Matt, and this could be totally off the mark, but this is just the vibe that I get, is that it has a genre-conscious protagonist.
Sick.
Who is specifically a Fudanshi. And so he is in a BL manga and he reads BL manga all the time. And he is constantly going like, this is just like the time in the BL manga that I read. It's too real.
Amazing.
And he's so like painfully aware of how cringe it is to be thinking that way. Yeah. But he still does it and loves it anyway. It's great.
That's so real.
He's just like me for real.
Yeah, like I'm being cringe and I'm not going to stop.
I'm being so cringe right now. Me the other day when I realized that the new haircut that I got is just the haircut that the protagonist of the manga that we're going to talk about today has.
Yeah.
Oh man. I sent you a really good joke in Discord that I'm not going to spoil because it's about volume 2 of the book that we're talking about today. Hey, Scout, what are we reading today?
Yeah, Scout, what are we reading?
What we're reading today is a manga called Love in the Palm of His Hand. We are reading the first volume. It is an ongoing series. There are, I think, 3 volumes released in Japan right now. The second volume, as Jill said in our chat, in our internal chat, is coming to the States. The physical volume is coming to the States in October. This is the story of a college student named Aoi Fujinaga, an aspiring actor, and Keito Maijima, the deaf underclassman he connects with after a chance encounter on the train. This first volume follows the two as a shared desire to be completely understood, draws their daily lives into closer and closer orbit and their feelings into clearer and clearer terms. I'm so excited to talk about this. But before we get into the manga itself, I want to do 2 things. One is a brief introduction to the terms that you might have heard us say a little bit. This is a comics podcast for everybody. So you might be everybody in this instance, and you might be saying, I've never heard of BL, I've never heard of yaoi, what is this? So in the simplest of terms, BL stands for boys love, which is comics.
What it sounds like.
It's what it sounds like. These are terms that began, I believe, in manga in Japan, but have sort of broadened out to encompass any work of any medium. BL's boys love. GL is girls love. So, we're working on gender binaries here, but these are the 2 sort of categories. And yaoi and the feminine equivalent yuri, the difference between what is BL and what is yaoi, what is GL, what is yuri, is essentially the yaoi and the yuri will have sex scenes. The BL and the GL generally won't. these terms are more interchangeable in like American circles. It's more delineated in Japanese circles, as I understand it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I pick up a lot of BL/yaoi, and especially on physical volumes, you'll see the word boys love. And I believe especially Seven Seas has like a brand called BL Boys Love that they put on their stuff. But like most of their shit has sex in it. So it's not, not
most of
like
them are shrink wrapped.
Yeah.
If it's shrink wrapped, it's got the sex in it. So, because some of the BL isn't shrink wrapped.
That's a tip for you.
But therefore it does not have the explicit.
If it's shrink wrapped, you might even get lucky and it'll actually have the genitalia in it and not just the white voids.
Yeah, you won't have the lightsabers.
The other problem is it's just more fun to say yaoi.
It is more fun to say yaoi.
So you just want to.
So true.
You just want to say it.
And so this is the pivots to my second sort of housekeeping bit. I would love to talk a little bit about everybody's experience, all the panelists' experience with the genre. So we'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah. So I'm not going to give my whole history of comics here, but I actually started reading American comics as an adult, not like not even 3 years ago. And I did that because I wanted to read Wiccan and Hulkling, the Marvel characters. I adore those two, like absolute, like two of my three favorite Marvel characters. And when I started getting into manga, which is not that long ago, I went first for Frieren. And second, jumped into a bunch of BL. So I'm talking like last November, but I've devoured a lot since then. And I don't know, I tend to enjoy stuff where people, like characters act like a little more like I expect like a normal human to act. So when I don't mind a trope, but when we can like move beyond a trope, you know what I mean? Like when we can like take that as a jumping off point for a character, then that's the stuff that I tend to enjoy. Also, when they have something more going on than just like a romance, like this book that we're talking about today.
Yeah. Jill, what about you, my friend?
Oh boy. Great start. Yeah. I didn't start like watching anime or reading manga. Like I started reading manga when my friend would lend me a volume or two on the bus because it was not usually something that was read in my house. And then I didn't really start watching anime until college. So I'm also like relatively new to like the specific genre of manga BL sort of stories. But for the past, I don't know, several almost decade, I guess, it has been a constant in my consumption. Both officially published stuff and, of course, like doujins, which are like fan-made comics and things like that.
Yeah, fan work, huge part of this genre as a whole.
Yeah, I've got quite a bit of doujins on my shelf right now.
Hell yeah. What about you, Robin?
Yeah. So I have the least experience reading comics of anyone on the show, and definitely the least reading BL. I think this is the first BL comic I've read. Yeah, it's just not my thing. Not to sound like a misandrist, but I'm a misandrist. No, but I really strongly tend toward things with female protagonists. Which I think is just largely a function of like my life having a male protagonist for a long time and me not being really that into it. Yeah, so I just tend to seek out things that are like from a woman's perspective. So this is new territory for me.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for coming along with us on this journey to talk about this comic with us.
But our brave host Scout, how about you?
I've been aware of it for most of my life. I would say when I was 13 or 14, I was introduced to the terms, and they just sort of like existed nonchalantly within my life for a long time. It wasn't until probably a little under a year ago. I think it was around the time both of my parents unfortunately came down with COVID. And I was self-quarantining in my room while they were self-quarantining in their room, trying to not get COVID. I had never tested positive, so shout out to masking within the house and staying isolated. And during that time, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I just started reading through a whole bunch of stuff in the BL and yaoi genres, just sort of like offhand, and then I became deeply like, oh, this is really fun. I especially gravitate towards the stories that are self-contained, one volume, like usually things that are between 5 and 10 chapters, 1 and 2 volumes, these sort of shorter stories following a relationship. And I do have something called the Fujoshi document, which is where I have been since I began this endeavor, writing down what I've read and like a little paragraph or two about about my thoughts about it for the last year.
Oh, so you were prepared when we started putting together that database of stuff that we might talk about on the show.
Yeah, she was ready.
I have, and that is why so many of the things that I did recommend are in the BL genre, because like this is a specific path that I have been following.
Nice.
Scout gave one of our friends a recommendation of like 6 BL short mangas that she thought she would enjoy as her birthday gift. She was like, here's a link to these 6 that are specifically, I think, tailored to your taste.
Amazing.
It's true. I did do this.
Incredible.
Custom
incredible
yaoi.
work. Custom yaoi feed.
The Fujoshi document is at this point in time 39 pages long.
Oh, wow.
Scout's a scholar.
I love the formality of the term, the Fujoshi document. I'm picturing it in like capital headline case every time you say it.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it's like. It just lives open on my computer, and it's just a running document that I'm constantly adding to.
We need a manga called the Fujoshi document.
Oh, I could write that.
Ooh. Okay. Yes.
That is how we get to what we are reading today. Where should we start with this? Where'd you guys like to start?
I mean, I don't know. The thing that I'm gravitated towards talking about is these 2 characters, having read this again like less than 2 hours ago, specifically Fujinaga and Keito, and like their personalities. I find them really interesting, really unique BL characters. They fit into like certain, buckets that I'm used to seeing in manga, but at the same time, like Fujinaga's an actor, and that's like his whole thing is expressiveness and sometimes over expressiveness. But it's an interesting take on like that kind of character. And then Keito also being, I think, fitting kind of into like that nervous, like not.
Well, he's an English major, right?
He's an education major.
Education.
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was English. I'm projecting.
Yeah. He's kind of this like at least when I first meet him, I think of him as this like nervous, quiet guy. But then you find out, because of what the book is about understanding each other and sign language and all of the above, exactly like how fast his mind is running at all times, and like how much he wants to be louder than he is as a person, and understood, which is like the core of the book. But I just find the two characters to be so interesting for each other, but also so interesting just as characters in a BL manga. Yeah,
I can totally agree with all of that. One of the notes that I wrote in the show doc for this episode is, oops, we got another creativity is hard and being perceived kind of hurts narrative. Didn't mean to take us here again so soon, but I feel like that ties in really well to what you said. This is so much a book about what it means to want somebody to understand you and bridge the gap between person to person, and to try and figure out what communication looks like and what like being genuine means. And it's good. It's good. The book is good.
Yeah, I really like that. Like, there are some moments where Keito does become like quite bold and like outgoing once he realizes that like Fujinaga understands him and is making an effort to understand him. I really appreciate that. If you understand why he comes off as kind of reserved at first, but once he sees Fujinaga making the effort, he's like, oh no, okay, like this is someone who I can like feel safe with and trust. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I really like that about this writer, Rinteku, specifically that they're able to get in these characters' heads very effectively and like say thoughts that like you don't see written down in stories very often that like are extremely relatable.
Yeah. I feel like one thing that's really strong about this within the genre of BL itself is that we do get perspective shifts and we get the thoughts of both leads. In a lot of stories, you will sort of have one of the romantic pair that will be sort of closed off to the reader as well as being closed off to the protagonist. And I really, really like about this one that we do get to see both of them thinking through things. Like Fujinaga is more forward, I would say, in the narrative, but we get a lot of Keito's internality here too.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when the first time you switch into Keito's thoughts, like it took me a second to realize we were in Keito's perspective just because he hadn't spoken before. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think especially in this case, something that I think I'm sure we'll get into is like the ways that it depicts deafness. Like I think there could be a very easy sort of way of this book falling into making Keito that like closed off, like more mysterious protagonist just because he can't speak like with his voice. And I actually really like that it makes an effort to let us hear him, you know, through his thoughts and through the ways that it depicts what he is like signing. I think this book does a good job in a lot of ways of avoiding any sort of tropes or like any sort of othering of Keito that I really appreciated. Like there was a point early on where I was like, oh, this is like a metaphor for not being understood and like wanting that connection. And I was like, it's kind of, you know, like sign language is a real thing. The deaf community is a real thing. And so like using it as this metaphor, I'm like, is that going to go into a weird place? And then it directly addresses that as well, where both characters talk about their feelings. There's a moment where I think Fujinaga talks very directly where he's like, I thought of sign, like once he starts learning to sign, he says something to the effect of like, I had started thinking of sign as our private language. And then he sees Keito talking to other people who sign and he realizes like, oh no, like this is just how he communicates. This is his world. And it really opens up both Keito and the idea of just a deaf protagonist in general in a way that I really appreciated.
I love that moment.
It's great.
Yeah, I'm so enchanted by the depictions of the signs too. They're really well rendered, and the way that the mangaka very deliberately goes out of their way to show the hands in many of the different positions because sign is so caught up in the actual motion of it. There's so many incredible panels of these sequences of hands and the way that they move that I just find so beautiful. And as a teenager, I took a couple of semesters of ASL at a school for the deaf. I unfortunately don't remember that much of the vocabulary and the stuff that I learned, but because of the experience that I had being taught by deaf teachers, and it was very much an immersion-based sort of class environment, so you weren't allowed to use your voice. You were only allowed to sign in the classes, etc. Because of that experience I had, I've always been really drawn to narratives or just any instance of seeing sign language. I love sign language. I think that it's such a interesting language, the way that it, like, just the genuine actual not phonetics, but just like the structure of it is really interesting to me. I love languages in general, and I really, really like the way that it's drawn here, because I have read actually a shoujo manga, a romance manga that has a relatively similar conceit to this, which I actually realized also opens with the characters meeting on a train, called A Sign of Affection. And I think that this story represents a deaf protagonist much better than that manga does. And a lot of that has to do with like what we've just been talking about, with the way that that it's used in the story and also in the artwork.
Yeah, the ways they depict their hands and stuff was very interesting. There were some, I'd be curious to hear if you have like any thoughts on this as well, Scott. And I don't know if Matt and Jill, if you have any experience with like ASL or anything like that either. But I worked for a time at a coffee shop where we had a couple of deaf employees, and a pretty decent chunk of our customers were deaf. And so we all learned like a little bit of ASL. I also don't remember any of it at this point, except for like thank you, which is what we used all the time. But there were some points in this where I really recognized some things that like I had felt also like as a hearing person interacting with deaf people, where there's some moments, especially early on, where Fujinaga is very sort of taken aback by the way that Keito is always like looking at him very intently and is like getting very close to him, or he will like take Fujinaga's hand in his to like sign, which I think is like something that I had that experience as well, as like the people who I was working with and like talking to were just very open about like, there's just a sort of a different expectation of like personal space because the way you were communicating is physical in that way, that I think I really, I don't know, that just really struck me as like, oh yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I like hadn't thought about, but like to see it depicted there was like, oh yeah, that feels like real. That feels true to life as like how a hearing person encounters deaf people.
Yeah, definitely.
The physicality in this book that really got me were the bits about Fujinaga needing to like turn his face to Keito, and how many times that's directly called out. And also there's like when Fujinaga meets the note takers and comments on the fact that one of them is making sure that her face can be fully seen by Keito, but her body is turned towards him. That stuff, and also like calling out and pointing exactly what's going on is the book is really, I feel like a little, it's like intellectual. And I think Keito can be too. We can talk about translations. I think one of them is a little more intellectual than the other, but that's some of the stuff I grabbed onto because that's the stuff that I'm interested in. I'm learning about a culture in like an intellectual way as well as an emotional way through, you know, the romance and the friendships in this book.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the things that I noticed so much is just how many times Fujinaga has to like correct himself. He'll be saying something and then he'll realize like, oh, I'm not facing him, he can't hear me, and he'll like turn and re-say it. And it's like a very frequent occurrence, but it's never like played for like it. I don't feel like it was ever like played for laughs or like sympathy. It was just like he's adjusting, and like this is the reality of adjusting to a new way of communicating, is like having to break out of your habits.
Yeah.
There's that scene when he's in the car with his director and he like yells out the window at Keito, and reading it the second time, the thought that I had about it, because he like apologizes and Keito's like, don't worry about it. And then they move on. And it reminded me of like when a friend changes their pronouns and like you have like 6 or 7 of those moments. And then, you know, the first time it's like, oh my God, I fucked up. And like by the 7th time, you're just like, sorry. And you say the right thing and you move on.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see that kind of thing in like a different environment. Like with like a different scenario.
Yeah, totally.
I 100% was thinking the same thing.
I think that's part of what makes that perspective shift so interesting too, because you see all those things from Fujinaga's perspective, where it's like his panic and his like, oh my God, I'm doing so poorly, I messed up. And then when you see the same thing from like when Keito talks about it, what he sees in those moments is, look how hard this guy is trying to connect with me. And it's just this very sweet expression of like, as the person who is like making those mistakes, you feel terrible. And as the person who is like, you see this person trying, you're like, oh, they're making an effort. This is nice. Like I this is actually good to see. I really appreciated that part of the perspective shift.
Yeah, I really liked that detail too.
He often will say that he's being cute whenever something like that happens.
Yeah.
Yes. I love, one of my favorite scenes is the scene when they're eating their pancakes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And there's the moment, I think, Robin, you even sent one of these panels.
We did, yeah. Okay, I must have taken a screenshot.
The moment when Keito signs, like, oh, but you are cute. You know, he's like, they're sort of joking about these girls that are paying attention to them, and Fujinaga says, oh, they were talking about us. They kept saying cute. And Keito says, me? Like, you know, me? They're saying I'm cute? And Fujinaga goes, no, obviously they're talking about me, just being jokey. But Keito signs, no, but they're right, you are cute. And Fujinaga goes, huh? And Keito turns away. What? What?
He stares at the camera, I guess.
Well, and it kind of also feels like denying him any argument, too. He's like, I can't see what you're going to say, so therefore it is not existing.
Well, he's also like staring directly at the women who were talking about them. So he's just like, I hear you. You know, I know what you're talking about, which was very cute. Yeah, there are all these like several moments in the first volume that we read where it does turn, like when it tries to go for humor, I think a lot of times it moves to these like chibi characters, which I think work works so well for this book because it is not, like you were pointing out, like when we were texting about it, Scout, like it's not focused on humor. Like it's focused on these very like human moments. So in order to sell the sort of like awkwardness or the tone shift, it goes into these like extremely silly drawings. And every time it did that, I laughed out loud. Like it's so effective the way that they deploy that.
The little chibis are so good.
Yeah.
Very
And
adorable.
I think that's a thing I've noticed in a lot of manga. Like the art style will be one way, but humor or like silliness will usually like revert to these little chibi characters.
Yeah, the
And it
cutaway
is
to a
always
chibi is always delightful.
Such a joy. I know when I was having Scout read one, she had one, like a folder saved of just screenshots of the little chibi faces that were made because they were so cute.
My sons.
I love a good deployment of a chibi. I will say that I have read some books that over rely on them. And those are ones that I'm just like, I don't know. There's a book called I'm Kind of Chubby and I'm Your Hero, which was cute. We're not here to talk about that book, but it has an over reliance on chibi for like comedic effect. But I thought Rinteku kind of cut to chibi in like a lot of really good moments and like never when it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a specific this one. On the train, we have this cutaway to Fujinaga going, yeah. I think he's so charming. I love him.
They're very fun. While we're talking about the art, do you want to, I know you brought up Scout wanting to talk about the sort of non-diegetic visuals, the way that it depicts not the shapes of the signs, but the meaning of them in a really interesting way.
Yeah. The one of the things that I thought was really, really cool about the artistic stylization in this manga is specifically these moments. This comes up very often, most often when Fujinaga is acting, because it is commented on a lot within the manga that Fujinaga acts very big. He acts very intensely, and he acts in such a way that it sort of sweeps you up in it, and you really feel like all of the things that he is acting out are happening. And in those moments, we have one of the big examples. I think my favorite is when he is acting out the children's story Momotaro, and we have these beautiful non-diegetic depictions of Momotaro happening around him as he is doing these big movements and telling the story. There's also a great scene later where he is pretending to be caught in a downpour, in a rainstorm. And even some of the other characters sort of start commenting on it in almost a meta way of like, it's not even windy in here, but I feel like I'm being blown around as they're being drawn as though they're being blown around in a big rainstorm.
There's like a big whoosh on that page too.
Yes, there is a big whoosh. His umbrella that he's miming having an umbrella, and then there's the actual drawing is like the umbrella being turned inside out and then like blown away in his hands.
Yeah. I love this page where it's Keito describing how he felt when Fujinaga was telling that story. And you see like all of the actions that Fujinaga did in the past, but they are now the like extra things on the page. They're not non-diegetic because they are things that happened, but they are the background of this storytelling. But then you also have like water and a plant and leaves falling down the page. And it takes you back to that moment in a really, really great way. Also, it's pretty. It's just gorgeous to look at.
Yeah,
so
they're very pretty. Yeah.
And yeah, it's really like the artist is really, Rinteku is really, really good at doing these drawings that do have sort of a extra sensory feel almost. Like they really did. It is a drawing that you can kind of feel in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I also like that was like, that feels like a part where the metaphor of a relationship between a hearing person and a deaf person works without like erasing either of their humanity or their like actual experience, where you see Fujinaga as like this struggling actor and he keeps getting this note that like, you're doing too much. Like you are making it too expressive and it's like, it's not believable. And so it's this thing that he feels like is a flaw in him, and like that he's trying so hard to communicate, but it's not getting through. And then he meets this person who lets him understand that like, no, you are doing that. This is just not the right audience for you. Like you were communicating, like you were successful. You just like were not in the right context. And I feel like that is like when I got that aspect of the story, it was like the most moving moment of it. Like, I don't know if this is like a queer thing or just like a human thing, but like I feel very strongly, and I feel like a lot of people do as well, that idea of like you want to find someone who makes you feel like you don't need to change for them. Like the things you've been doing all along are the way you should be, and they just haven't been appreciated. And I felt such a strong like association with both of those characters in that moment. And then later on, like after they have that conversation when he's talking to the director, it feels like he is better able to explain what he's doing, because after that point they talk and he's like, no, what I'm trying to do is make sure that everyone can understand me. Like I am trying to speak to people who don't hear it when you are being too subtle and when you are like not doing these big, expressive actions. And I just thought that like that shift in his perspective was also like just so moving.
Yeah, there was a lot of like real relatability in, for me at least, in Fujinaga, like constantly being told that he is like too much and like too expressive, and like the idea that that is just a matter of perspective of, the different types of people that you are around is just a really, I will say, uncommon way of depicting things like that expressive-ness.
One of the more interesting scenes to me in the first volume, at least, is so we're only covering the first volume. I've read the first two, so I won't say anything that's in volume 2. But I think this kind of conversation moves into that volume in interesting ways. But the scene where he's talking to his director and he's talking about how he cast him in this like comedy role, and Fujinaga's like pissed. He's like, "What the fuck? I just want a serious role. Like, what did you do?" And I think it's interesting to watch him come to terms over the course of this first volume with like what it would take to be an actor and not compromise any of himself, right? He wants to be on TV and in film, but learns that like that's probably not his place if he's gonna be extremely expressive like that, and like learns through meeting Keito like where he would be good and in which kinds of productions on which stages would be good for him. Just I don't know. I've been performing and making stuff for people basically my whole life, so that stuff is extremely relatable to me.
Yeah.
Well, and isn't there? Oh gosh, there is a moment where I can't remember what the.
Are you talking about the part near the end where Keito feels like Fujinaga's going to quit acting, and then they kind of have to? Okay.
I was going to go back to somebody said was mentioning why are you trying out for TV? Wouldn't you be better at X type of acting?
Oh, they talk about Rakugo.
Rakugo, that's what it was. I was like, what the hell is the name of it? I was reading, and I kind of forgot to keep up with it, but I was reading a manga about Rakugo, and it's like, yeah, he probably would be really good at it, but that is not they're seeing the way that he is expressing himself as they're seeing it differently than he is trying to present it. They're seeing it oh, this guy is really expressive and he's got really big movements and a lot of drama. He'd be perfect for this type of acting that is just that, but his purpose is not just to be big about it. It is specifically to make other people hear him, which is not the purpose of that type of
right.
acting.
Yeah, he is big. He is big in a way that they are equating with an intent that he does not.
Yes,
that he is not trying to convey. Kind of. In the very first couple of pages, we have this line from one of the directors at one of these auditions, one of these failed auditions that we see, where he says he's been a theater kid since he was 4. That explains it.
Yeah, that got a chuckle out of me.
Brutal, eviscerated, demolished.
Put it in your meme folder.
The man has been absolutely just totaled.
I don't know if anyone has other things they want to talk about, but coming off of this, there's a panel, and I brought it up in Discord earlier. It's right after that moment where he's told the story, and he's acting, and Keito's I can't believe that he got that so easily. He's so good at expressing really, really specific things with his body that most hearing people have trouble with. I'm still trying to find this page.
I've got it in the physical version. his brain is already busy translating text to movement while he acts it all out, but he's also thinking about how to express a name several steps ahead. Fujinaga said he was only trying to use his body to express the scenes and story. That's not so simple for people who are used to relying on their ears, but he doesn't know that.
Mm-hmm. It's so stuff like that, like stuff like he doesn't know that he doesn't have, and I don't mean like lived experience, but like he literally does not have the experience. He has not put in the hours to understand that this is unique and better than other people can do. Right.
It's not something everybody can do. Yeah.
And then, Scout, you made a point about, like, he doesn't know that kind of reading more as, like, not even just, like, he isn't aware. It's like, he doesn't even get it. Like, he's doing this and he doesn't understand. Yeah,
I'm in the middle of learning Japanese bit by bit right now. And I was enjoying a little bit of enrichment by looking over the first chapter in Japanese and then comparing the two different translations that we have. And one of the things I noticed was that line, but he doesn't know that, in Japanese, it reads a lot more like, and this guy doesn't even know. He doesn't even, he's got all that and he doesn't even know it. That I don't think either of the English translations really captured that, that feeling in the text of like it being this very affectionate, like, how can he not realize
this motherfucker? Yeah, so to specifically, we've been talking a lot about translations in our texts about this, and I realized that I originally read the Viz Manga Up translation the first time, and the one that I have physical is from Square Enix. And in the Square Enix, that line, he's like, but he's also thinking about how to express a name several steps ahead, is translated differently. It says, yet he was able to think about a personal pronoun in the midst of that. And that's what I mean by, like, some of these translations, Keito is a big old nerd. And I enjoyed reading the Viz translation, I think, more in some ways than I did Square Enix. I think Square Enix gets across, like, the difficulty of understanding between the two characters more. But I think in terms of, like, me getting to know the characters, I liked the Viz one a lot more, actually.
Yeah, I am very much, like, I keep trying to think which one is my favorite, and it's amazing. It's incredible to me. Like, part of learning Japanese over the last, like, half year, one of the things that it's really brought to the forefront of my mind so much is the subtleties of translation, and, like, just I've become hyper aware of how in translating to any language, I think just, like, I'm aware of it now, specifically with the nuances of Japanese to English, because, like, I am now a lot more aware about Japanese sentence structure and grammar and how it differs completely from English. And it's amazing that there's two different, like, officially licensed translations, and they get different things right in ways that I think are better than the other one. I just think it's so interesting to me that it can be so different.
Yeah. I'm thinking specifically about the one that I called out for, like, it being, I feel like, severely different between mine and Robin's versions.
Yeah, I think this is the one that I'm looking at now too. When when Keito takes Fujinaga's hand.
Yeah. So yeah. Robin, do you want to talk about what the version that you read, what that kind of?
Yeah. So there's a scene where they're like, just Keito grabs Fujinaga's hand to walk with him, and Fujinaga says, "Hey, you won't be able to sign if you hold my hand." With some, emotional bearing ellipses in there. But you won't be able to sign if you hold my hand.
And then in my version, it says, I can't sign like this, which I feel like that specific, like, difference in the translation has it definitely changes the meaning a little bit for me in both of those. Because specifically it is talking about the two of their differences in communicating. And I'm honestly not sure which I prefer.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one a lot because the only bits of the Square Enix translation I've seen are the ones that you all have shared, and I think this is the one that stood out for me as, like, I like the Viz one so much more. Where I think it just calls more attention to what's being said. Where it's like it almost feels like he's realizing what's happening. Like, he's like, hey, you won't be able to sign if you hold my hand. It's almost like this thing where he's like, oh wait, you're holding my hand, is kind of like the emotion that I get from that.
Yeah.
And it also just feels more like the way it's presented, like you won't be able to sign as opposed to I won't be able to sign, makes it feel like, oh, Keito is like almost making this sacrifice to be able to hold my hand.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. I definitely felt that one more.
Yeah, to me, the Square Enix one feels more like because they were like, he was trying to like have a conversation and ask him a bunch of questions before that. And so to me, it felt more like the Square Enix version is saying it like, he's like, he wants to have a conversation. He wants to be able to sign in front of him. So it feels more of a like, less of an emotional impactful moment in terms of the romance, but stays like impactful in terms of like, hey, I still want to like carry on our conversation. I still want to talk to you, but like, I can't do that like this. And then Keito's like, no, it's fine. You can just do it with one hand. It's all good.
Well, and in that moment, it's like right after they've been having these conversations of like Keito realizing like how much Fujinaga's expression in sign is because of spending time with him, right?
Yeah.
And they mean, and he's starting to realize the effect that signing with Fujinaga has had on Fujinaga. And it's also like right after stuff has come to the forefront and like they're actually honest about their feelings, or are about to be, I guess, because it's like the next scene where he kind of confirms that. So it's a cute little moment that, I don't know, helped me, the person who was like always looking for people to be honest about their feelings in these books, to be like, oh, we're getting there.
This is a purely uneducated, barely educated guess. I would be curious. I don't have access directly to the Japanese version of this chapter. I only have the first chapter for free in Japanese, but my gently educated guess here would be that the reason they're so different, and it even changes from one version to another, of you won't be able to sign to I won't be able to sign, is that in the original Japanese there were no pronouns involved at all in whatever the sentence was.
Yeah, that is probably very true. Because I've noticed that a lot with like fan translations differing from official translations in other mangas, where it's like the use of the pronouns or lack thereof like tends to trip up the translators, and it completely changes the meaning of like a sentence, and it leads to so much confusion. Yeah,
because it can even, especially there's some instances where it can even completely change who's saying
that's what I was going to say.
Who the speech bubble is attributed to.
I actually found this book to be difficult to understand some of that. It's like one of my gripes with the book is that sometimes there's a speech bubble and I'm not 100% sure who's speaking, and it takes me a page or so to understand.
Yeah. I had a couple of those moments too where I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
It was just very, hard to follow sometimes.
I think it's interesting you say that about your like very minimally educated guess about pronouns in Japanese, because they're talking about the difference in JSL and Japanese, and is it Japanese sign, which is a different language? Is that right?
Right. Japanese. Yeah. So JSL is more similar to ASL like versus English, where JSL and ASL both have their completely own grammatical structures and are much more based on gesture than on actually using words like pronouns or like referral words, etc. And signed Japanese,
that's what it is.
Is when you are literally saying Japanese sentences and signing with a Japanese sentence grammatical structure.
Yeah, because they have a conversation one time about how he wants to use Keito's name, because so far all he's been using to refer to Keito is pointing at him. And this is just my complete lack of knowledge about the Japanese language. But I'm like, how does that happen in Japanese versus English versus JSL versus signed Japanese, right? That is just like, I mean, we've been talking about translation, but this whole book is about translation as well.
Yeah.
It's just like a really interesting, like layered thematic aspect that is maybe not directly talked about. Like I would love to hear an interview or read something about like how this was translated in like both instances.
Oh yeah, I want to be there. I want to be in the rooms. I want to be the fly on the wall, seeing like the discussions. Definitely.
Jill, did you have something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just think it's interesting too how we're mentioning like, oh yeah, this is, there's like several different layers of different languages, and it is a book that is sort of basically about translation, and we have 2 different English translations of it too, which I just think kind of like is kind of reflective a little bit of just like how I'm just a nerd about language. I just think it's cool.
So I have
like
become
it's just
even
really
more so
interesting about like not only how the different translations are formulated because of the original language, but how different translations kind of affect meaning, and how like different translations might be affected by that particular translator's like lived experience or dialect and stuff like that. And I just think it's very, very fascinating to see like all of the different ways something can be interpreted. And that's just me nerding out about language because, it's an interesting, fascinating thing.
I feel you so deeply. One thing that I'm just like we were talking about difficulty of knowing what character is speaking when. And as we were saying that, I was like, wait a minute. And I was going to look at the first chapter in Japanese again. Some of the text is so small on my computer screen that it's hard for me to tell. But one thing that is very consistent in Japanese typography in manga that is different from the way that the typography is deployed in English translations is they use so many different fonts. There isn't necessarily like bold and italics in Japanese script. So the thing that they use instead for that stuff is literally just using a different font. And so I was curious if in some of those instances where it becomes difficult to see, to understand exactly who's talking in English, if that is represented by the 2 speech bubbles having 2 distinct fonts in Japanese. I can't confirm nor deny it at this exact moment, but something that I thought of.
Last time you wowed us with thoughts on speech bubbles and lettering. And so I was paying attention to it this time. I love when the lettering gets really like chicken scratch handwriting. Like I love when Keito finds out that Fujinaga is an actor, and actor looks like it's gonna fall apart, like it's gonna fall out of the word balloon. They do this a lot when, for example, like Keito is saying something and Fujinaga can't quite understand him. But there's also like measures of understanding. There's this text is a little wobbly, but then it's spelled incorrectly, or there's letters missing.
This is a huge part of one of the things between the 2 translations that I definitely wanted to bring up. And one of the reasons why I finish your thought with it, but I have thoughts about this.
That was where I was going to go next, was that in the Viz manga one, every time that happens, they're doing it's spelled wrong, and you can as a hearing person, you can hear the way that Keito might be saying that out loud and the way that you might misunderstand that. They do that less in this one and do that rather with like a visual trick rather than like a brain auditory trick.
I personally prefer the like visual of the letters kind of moving around. But I think that's also just my personal like gripe with having read too many, like whether it's like officially published things or like fan fiction or other writing where like people will be like a little over the top with the like misspelling sort of thing to convey that it is sounding just very different. And I think for a visual medium, having that like wobbly letter like really works. But that's just my opinion.
So this was one of the things that this was one of the big reasons I wanted to look at the first chapter in Japanese, was because I was curious to see which of the 2 adaptational choices, the sort of dropping of letters in the manga up Viz version, or the physical on the page sort of minor distortion of letters in the Square Enix version, was closer to what they were doing originally. It's closer to the Square Enix version. It is that some of the kana will sort of be sideways instead of being up and down. And I'm of two minds. Because I do think that just making the letters a little wobbly, the way that they do in the Square Enix version, is the more elegant choice. I also think that there can be ways that depicting something like a speech impediment or a difference in actual pronunciation of a word could end up feeling infantilizing or feeling a little fraught. So I can understand not wanting to do that. But I also do think that there is value in depicting that Keito does speak differently and sound different because the way that he has had to learn to speak is so drastically different from the way that a hearing person learns to speak and use their voice. But I don't know if it's remarked upon enough in the text itself for me to come down fully on, like, I really wish that both versions of this had done the sort of literal depiction of the difference in the pronunciation.
Yeah. I think that makes sense in the Japanese to do the visual effect, because you can't really just drop a letter like the way that characters are written. Like you can't just be
exactly,
like,
yeah.
This isn't going to have a T. Like the one that I was looking for here was when they're on the train and there's a point where Keito says lightning and there's like an apostrophe where the T would be, which like, you couldn't drop like a single letter like that. And I think that also it does feel like you can hear the way he's saying that in a way that I think works. Like I think there is something in the visual effect that like you get the idea of what they're going for, that like this is slightly off, but I think this lets you sort of hear the way that he is saying it, and the way that like, I mean, especially like as a hearing person, like this is how I would hear him expressing that.
The thing I think that I also appreciate about the way that the specific letter, they're very conscious about which letters they're dropping, and they are dropping things that are unvoiced. Which are the things that it's very accurate to the speech pattern that you would see in somebody who learned to speak without being able to actually physically hear the words.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I'm with you. Like where there's too much like dialect or what, you know, there's some ways of depicting someone who speaks in like a non-standard way that is very infantilizing and like sucks to see. But this one feels very, it's never punching down or anything. Like it's just representational. There's not like a judgment there.
Exactly.
Which I did like.
So I think both are good for different reasons.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how I come down on both of the I mean, it's basically the moral of the story is both are good at different things for different reasons.
Almost like the characters that are
good
at different things for different reasons.
Damn. We did it, gamers. We solved it.
Were there any other moments that people loved in this book?
I really loved, just visually, I loved the moment where Keito tells Fujinaga his sign name.
Yes.
Yes, that was very sweet.
It was just so beautiful, and it felt very, with the zoom in on Keito's face and the like expression that Fujinaga has, it just feels like a very like a moment of both of their ways of communicating just kind of mingling on the page there, in just such a nice, like, honestly very pretty pretty sequence of panels.
The expression specifically on the panel where Keito is signing love really gets me, with the little wobble in his mouth and the
wobble in his mouth,
the tilt of his eyebrows. I just feel it so deeply.
I also just love the dialogue in that moment, because this is like when they are basically resolving all of this tension. Keito has kissed Fujinaga on the train and they're talking about like, why did you do that? Right?
Yeah.
And Fujinaga did not say what Keito thought he said, but like does have feelings. So he's deciding whether or not he's going to lie to him and accept that this relationship is going to happen, or tell him the truth and maybe risk that it doesn't. And I mean, I think the reason he decides to lie to him and say, yes, that's what I said, is because Keito says, the man who loves you so much, Keito Meijima. And like, I don't know. I was reading this and I was like, oh, I forgot that he like says something so like intense to Fujinaga in this page. It's very deliberate in that moment also that Keito signs the man who loves you so much, doesn't say it out loud, which is something that Fujinaga has commented on earlier in the book, that Keito talks a lot about loving to speak despite not being able to hear his own voice. But Fujinaga has noticed that in moments where he's really, really nervous, Keito will default to not speaking at all and only signing. So I wanted to just point out that he specifically is signing in that moment, which I think is such a nice touch.
Yeah, I did want to say, like, my kind of, not necessarily, like, interpretation of, like, the scene where he is, like, deciding whether or not to, like, explain the whole entire situation of, like, Keito misreading what he said. Because to me, it felt very much like he heard the words and the feelings are there. So why bother, like, trying to draw it out and complicate things when I can just say, yeah, you're right. Because, like, he realizes, yeah, I wouldn't mind if that was you.
Yeah, it's very much a moment of, was that specific moment, did he misinterpret the specific exact thing in the moment? Yes, but was the sentiment actually there all along? Also, yes.
Yeah, which is, I think, why it's, at least in the Square Enix version, it says, did I read you wrong? And Fujinaga is like, I didn't say that, but he does say, you weren't wrong. Not, you didn't read me wrong. It was like, no, you're right. I have those feelings for you.
Yeah.
As less of a, like, we had a slight misunderstanding, but it's okay. And more of like, no, you know that I have a crush on you. So it's all good.
I took his, I didn't say that to be like in his head.
Oh, yeah. No, it was. It was. I'm just saying, like, that kind of like informing his decision of like whether or not to make it into more of a complication than like it genuinely needed to be.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, it's just easier to say that you got it right the whole time. We don't have to go into all that.
It's not necessarily like lying, in my opinion, because a lot of like romance stories will like go on this where it's like, well, you lied to me at the start of the relationship, and it's like, I didn't, and the feelings are still there, but it was, it's the miscommunication trope. I feel like can be played up, and I was like really worried that this is going to be something, but like it is a literal miscommunication that like doesn't need to be blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
And it's very refreshing.
Yeah, it's interesting how they don't deploy that in the way that it often is. Like there is a miscommunication. It's settled very quickly. But I think like so much of this book is about like the ways that they don't communicate in the same way. They're often not like saying the same things, but they're able to understand each other anyway. And so for the start of their relationship to have that same structure of like, it's not really what I said, but you this
understood
is real. Like,
what I meant. Yeah, especially because like
that this is happening. Like,
yeah, because Fujinaga even says like most of his signing is not like any sort of typical, like he's not using the correct words. He's just very much conveying the emotions with it. So I feel like that really worked well for the two of them.
I usually really hate that miscommunication trope. It's actually one of my least favorite things in media generally.
When
people refuse to talk about something, and that is the central conflict.
It's so agonizing so often.
But I liked it in this moment because both of them were at least emotionally honest about it. And also because it was resolved so quickly. But I also like sometimes that gets used in other BL as like the whole plot of the romance.
Yep.
And that stuff I was gonna say bores me, but it's really annoys me. I like can't finish those. I can't finish those books. I also think often it leads to stories that are about queer characters who don't want other people to know that they're queer or like are not quite comfortable with coming out yet. And that's a valid story to tell. It's just not one that I'm interested in anymore. And I think a lot of, and I don't know if this is because of different Japanese ideas of queerness. I don't frankly just don't know. But like a lot of BL relies on that as a way to push a story forward, relies on I don't want my family to know, relies on what about the people in this train or whatever.
Right.
And this book is not pushing that under the rug like that. Those pressures don't exist, right?
Right.
But it's not like about those things, and those things don't like get in the way of at least us, the reader, understanding what's going on in these men's heads, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Any plot that's like that could be resolved by having one conversation, I'm just like, just have the conversation then.
Yeah.
And
to
I agree with the guy
be
who's-
clear,
I
I
was
like
glad-
it when there is the miscommunication and then they resolve it pretty quickly afterwards. Like, I'm okay with that. It's when it becomes the, like, this
Sure.
is the
Yeah.
main
Yeah.
issue that's going to become, like, the defining, like,
Right. Yeah.
drama
I'm glad
in the
like,
relationship.
They got like 3 pages of it and then moved on.
Mhm.
And I agree, Matt. Also, the idea that they're just like, it's never an issue of like, I feel like, I mean, I only have like, girls love to go on with this, but I feel like there's some where it's like, it almost feels like they've never heard of being gay before.
Yeah.
Like, where they're just
Yeah.
like, how could this be? We're both girls. And it's like,
I'm
well,
a
it's
boy and I have a feeling for a boy.
yeah. And here the only conflict is like, does he actually like me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there's nothing
really
about like
liked
the
that.
queerness to it, which I really like.
And there is always a little undercurrent of that in Does He
Sure.
Really Like Me? But like, it's not the point of the book.
Right.
Yeah. And even in the scene where like what I think like Fujinaga like jumps over a railing and like lands on Keito to
That
talk
was
to him.
so cute.
It's very cute, but also the people around them are just like, oh, how weird and cute. Like none of them are like,
Yeah.
but they're boys. It's like,
But they're
okay,
both
cool. Like we're just
boys.
we're gonna act like everyone's like a grown up here. This is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I read this book recently called Restart After Coming Home. And then like the second one is called Restart After Going Hungry, I think it is. But like that book starts out as this like really just like open about being gay kind of thing, and then like ends on this note that is like kind of regressive, and it really upset me reading the second volume. And so getting 2 volumes into this now and not seeing any of that is really refreshing, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. There can be those moments where it's like, wait, we've gone backwards.
It's like,
Yeah.
does
It's
this
hey,
take
now.
place in like 1982? Like what's happening?
Yeah.
Or like the relationship version of it where you're like, y'all had sex. Like, you're into each other.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You were
The
beyond
we
this
had
conversation.
sex, but what are we is
Yeah.
so real. It's so
Which,
real.
like,
in
that,
so
yes,
many of the
that
comics
is
I've
real.
read.
Yeah, no,
but I
that's
think
really
we've
good.
had sex, but are we gay is a little harder
Yes.
to
Yeah.
square. Like,
It's a little harder to justify on that one.
Oh, but there's so many I've read where they're like, yeah, I had sex with him, but that doesn't mean I'm into guys.
Yeah.
You're at least into guy.
You're into a guy. Minimum one guy.
You have been in one guy. So, like, I would say
Hate to break it to you, buddy.
Oh, man.
that was a bad joke. I'm so sorry.
No, it was a
No, it was
perfect
perfect.
joke. It was beautiful.
Anything else?
Cute manga. I liked it a
Cute
lot.
manga.
I can't wait for the next volume to come out.
these boys.
Did you read volume 2?
No, I have not, because I'm bad at reading things online. Specifically, like manga and comics. I'm very bad at reading on a screen. And that's just a personal thing. Like, I feel the need to zoom in, and I prefer to do that manually by putting it closer to my face.
I'm looking up when the paperback comes out for volume 2.
October 7th.
Yep, I just saw
looked
that.
it up on Barnes & Noble earlier.
Nice.
I had one more just fun little thing that goes back to language a little bit. There's a line in here where Keito is thinking about Fujinaga and the way that Fujinaga acts and the way that he is always trying to be understood and is always trying to adapt, like to communicate with Keito through adaptation, etc. And the line is, he's like a chameleon. I really like that line, and I think I wanted to share a little fun fact, which is that chameleon is in the Japanese title.
Oh.
The Japanese title is Chameleon wa Tenohira ni koi o suru. I'm, again, take my translation with a grain of salt, but the way I would read that, having, a beginner's understanding of Japanese grammar, would be the chameleon holds love in his palm.
That's so cute.
And I just think it's really cute.
It is cute.
Love in the palm of the chameleon's hand would also be a valid translation, but they specifically using the verb suru in the title implies the act of holding, to hold something instead of just something being passively in the palm, which is how I got there.
I mean, I said this in Discord, but love in the palm of his hand also made me giggle as a title.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told my girlfriend about it and she laughed immediately. I was like, it's not, hold on.
It's not that kind of love.
It's not yet anyway.
This is a BL manga, not a yaoi.
Not a yaoi manga. Well, Keito kind of wants it to be.
Okay, yeah. So when I read the first one, my translation didn't have the Keito's perspective translated.
Oh, the little side story?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and Keito's horny as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Horny for Fujinaga.
No,
He's
so
like-
here's the thing. That reminded me, and this is going to set Scout off, that reminded me so much of Sasaki and Miyano. Because I remember I got into it because of one panel where he's like, I need to calm down because I'm about to, like, put my hands all over this boy. And I want to make sure that he's, like, chill.
Yeah, he says the phrase, I've long been hoping that one day he'll give every part of himself just to me. And like, this isn't a very physical scene. So I really only think he's talking about sex in that moment.
I mean, yeah, he literally says, I feel like my hands will move on their own if I don't stop myself. I just can't help but want every other part of you aside from your voice. It's like, okay, wow.
I will say in the second volume, it's not that much of a spoiler to say he continues to be horny in the second volume.
Good.
He's in the horny agonizing phase of his life right now.
I'll say I've read volume 2. It's very good. So if you're
Volume 2 is
listening
really good.
and want to check that one out too, I definitely recommend it.
Probably doesn't go the place you would expect it to go after reading this.
Yeah, for sure.
In a really fun way.
Yeah.
But also still like totally follows the same themes and everything. And there is more of that.
Yeah, I definitely intend to keep reading. I really like
There's
this.
more of that non-diegetic like visual flair that I think is so good in that second volume too.
Yep. Is that it? Did we make a show?
I think we made a
did.
show.
This might be a show.
So this has been In Sequence. Thank you for listening. It is a member of the Worst Garbage Podcast Network, and you can find us at theworstgarbage.online. I am Scout, and you can find me on Tumblr and Blue Sky at HumbleGoat, and see any of the art that I do on my portfolio website, scoutwilkinson.myportfolio.com. And my fellow panelists, what about you? Do you have anything to plug, Jillian?
I don't have anything personally that I would feel the need to plug. You can find me on Plot Twists at Blue Sky. But I would like to plug giving a trans person $10.
Great plug. What about Robin?
Yeah, you can give me $10. You can find me on Blue Sky at Robin Bombas. And you can also watch my streams with my friend Annie at Parallel Players on Twitch whenever we decide to do those.
Awesome. And Matt.
Yeah, you can find me at matt.bsky.social, and you can watch my YouTube videos. I'll say my writing partner Lex and I are working on a really cool one. I got to interview the developers of Hordes LLC Limited Labyrinth Corporation, and we had a really cool conversation that we're working on a video about that. So if people out in the world hear this sometime, that video will probably be out. So
Wow.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Support your local library, support your local
Yes.
comic shop, and until next time, remember to communicate.
TWG, the worst garbage, online.